This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Welcome to another episode of Agent Provocateur. I'm Allan Walsh with Adam Wylde. How are you, Adam?
Hello, sir. Oh, I'm great. I'm very excited for today's show.
As am I. Our guest this week is a pioneering, trailblazing sports writer and journalist, 47 years as a sports writer, 34 with the venerable Los Angeles Times. She's covered 18 Olympics, 30-plus Stanley Cup finals, NHL lockouts, maybe we'll talk about that, NBA finals, Super Bowls, World Series. She's the 2005 winner of the Hockey Hall of Fame's prestigious Elmer Ferguson Award, and she's the first female journalist to be honored with a plaque in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Please let's give a big welcome to Helene Elliott.
Wow, thank you. You're
All
building
right.
this up. I don't know if I can live up to all this.
Well, I said this just before we started recording, and I think it's only appropriate to say it now. Helene, you are one of my heroes, and I don't use that term lightly at all in any way. I think you know how much respect I have for you in all of our dealings over many, many years, but you are truly one of my heroes. And I have to say, you've seen my kids grow up. We've run into each other many, many times. And I've always used you as an example with my daughter, who you've seen many times when she was little and as she's grown. And now she's a film and English major at Berkeley. I've always used you as an example of there is nothing that you can't accomplish, because when you were a little girl growing up in Brooklyn, I don't think there were many female sports writers on the scene, and you were, when you broke into the business, one of the first. There were a few that came before you, but not many. I'm sure those female sports writers were your heroes, but you did crash through a male-dominated profession. I read your farewell column in the LA Times, published in the last day, and you talked about on the press level, there was only a urinal. There was no bathroom even for a female journalist. So welcome to the show. Adam and I are so excited to have you here. And what a career. What a run. I would love to talk about how you got started. How did you get into this business?
Well, I just always loved to write. Even as a kid, I would keep little journals and write poems and write for the school. In junior high school, we had a literary magazine, so I remember writing poems and things. And I used to have a great memory for numbers. Now, of course, I can't remember anything. But as a kid, I used to have all the home run hitters, memorized, 534 and 512 and, who hit how many and all that. And it just seemed natural to me. Why not put sports and writing together? And I didn't know that, there weren't women out there doing that. I just thought, why not? It just made sense to me. And I remember in high school talking to my college advisor, and she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a sports writer. And she laughed at me. And I said, no, why are you laughing? Why not? Women can't be sports writers. Pick something you can reasonably expect to do. Which it's kind of like, okay, maybe no woman or many women hadn't been doing it, but why discourage somebody like that, And I'd say, you know what, you're going to face really big odds against it, but here's what you can do. But it was just so discouraging that I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. At least I have to try and see how far it goes. And I just kept going.
And where was your first job as a sports writer? Where were you?
Not counting my junior high newspaper, getting an article in that. I guess I went to Northwestern University for college, and I had a summer internship at the Miami Herald. And I remember they sent me out to cover all kinds of things. They sent me out to cover the fights in Miami Beach, which were then a big, big thing. And I didn't know because I'd never been to a prize fight before, but you sit in the first couple rows and they said to me, "Oh boy, you're not wearing good clothes for this." I said, "What do you mean?" So you sit in the first two rows, you're going to get splattered with sweat and with blood. And I'm thinking, "Ooh, what is this all about?" How come I didn't know? But it's true. It was just the most astonishing thing. I never realized it, and I learned very quickly. You don't wear good clothing to if you're sitting that close at a boxing match.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And what was your first exposure to hockey?
I had a friend in junior high school. Her dad had played semi-pro hockey. And there were three of us, three really good friends. And one day this friend's dad took us to a Rangers game. And I went, wow, this is fun. I like this stuff. I mean, I'm a clod. I can't, walk two steps without falling over my own feet. And here are these people skating and doing all these amazing things and shooting the puck and being graceful. And I went, wow, this is neat. I like this. And to me at that point, I mean, I'm this kid from this little corner of Brooklyn, watching the Rangers play in places like Montreal and Toronto. That was so exotic to me. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I said, I like this. I'm going to start listening on the radio and watching on TV. And I just fell in love with the game.
So when you started as a sports writer and being one of the first females in the industry, how did teams react to you? How did players react to you when you were on the beat and doing what you do so brilliantly after a game, gathering up quotes and writing your post-game story? What was that like for you?
It was strange because, there were still teams that didn't let women sit in the press box. I mean, Shirley Fischler, Stan Fischler's wife, went through it before I did, and she had a tougher time. But, there was still this air of suspicion that if you were a woman and you were doing this, you were just looking for a husband, and it couldn't be that you were actually a journalist and you loved the sport and you wanted to write about the sport. There was always some kind of suspicion that you had an ulterior motive somehow. But a lot of times there was outright hostility. And there were a lot of teams that would not give us equal access. I mean, I remember standing outside locker rooms. You would have to talk to a team publicity person and say, I want to speak to, Marc-Andre Fleury. And the team publicity guy would have to go into the room, talk to Fleury, and Fleury would have to agree to come out to talk to me. And sometimes after a loss, athletes didn't want to come out, and I can't blame them for that. It's an extra effort. It's, something that they weren't particularly keen about doing. So we were at a distinct disadvantage because we weren't afforded the same access that the male reporters were.
Yeah. So all the males would go into the locker room or into the dressing room and be standing with the players and talking to all of them, anybody that they want, and you were forced to stand outside. Mm-hmm.
Though I have to say hockey was still ahead of the other sports. But I mean, like in Toronto, it became such a stupid thing because Harold Ballard was was just absolutely against it. And he made a big show of it. And I wasn't on a crusade. I was just trying to do my job, as we all were. And, he turns it into this big tabloid exploit. And that's not what it was. And, to its credit, the NHL, I think, was just so eager to have coverage of any kind. I think that they realized in the early stages that, hey, female reporters are going to help promote the sport. They're going to write about the sport. They're going to help hockey. Why not let them in? And I remember Al Arbor was very good with the Islanders about that. He was very supportive in the early years to Mary Flannery, particularly, who was working for the New York Daily News then. Laurie Mifflin was covering for the New York Rangers, covering the Rangers for the Daily News. And, the officials of those teams were very enlightened and very progressive, but it certainly wasn't that way across the whole league.
Right. Adam?
Well, I just want to say, as a lifelong Toronto Maple Leafs fan and somebody who loves the history of the team and grew up here, I am not surprised at all by your comments about Harold Ballard. There are interviews from the CBC, from the archives, that show just what his views were. But what amazes me about you, Helene, is when I was doing the research, you talked about a few minutes ago waiting outside of the dressing room. I don't think people quite understand what that would have meant for you, because you've gone to the game, you've seen the game, you've got a recap to write, you got to get this to print in the morning, and you could be waiting out there for hours, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's not like it was instantaneous. You were waiting there for long periods of time to get the same quotes that all the male reporters were allowed to get in. And if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong here, women, it wasn't that they didn't want you in the dressing room. It's that it wasn't allowed except by court order in certain jurisdictions. Is that true?
Yeah. Some teams, again, were progressive and did allow us in. They would talk to the players or the team captain, the alternate captains, and kind of discuss it. Or some teams would, before, ask us to wait a minute or two and say, hey, we're having some female reporters come in, which is fine. Give them a couple minutes warning if that's what made people feel more comfortable. That was perfectly fine. But I remember I was working for the Chicago Sun-Times, and they sent me to cover a Notre Dame football game. And there was he was older to me then. I don't know how old he really was, but there was a guardian of the door, by a gatekeeper, and he kept pushing me further and further away from the door to the room, to the point where I was locked outside the gates. I had to go back around to get into the stadium. I mean, it was just absurd in so many instances. But again, I think we really do need to credit people like Al Arbor, who made it easier and said to the players, hey, these reporters are doing their jobs. You'll treat them with the same respect you treat the other reporters. And that helped an awful lot.
What about players? Because, in your column yesterday, you wrote about some players who refused to talk to any of the reporters if there was a female sports writer amongst them.
Right.
Did you actually experience players who didn't want to talk to you?
Absolutely. It was mostly baseball players. But yeah, and there was a time when I was at Newsday and I was covering the Mets, and Dave Kingman started following me around the locker room, and he was mimicking, taking notes. He was pretending he was taking notes on me. And it was just kind of very, he's a big guy, and it just kind of makes you a little nervous to have this guy looming over your shoulder. And I'm trying to interview other players and trying to do my job. And he's just standing there and just being really creepy. And, it was just so unnecessary. Why go out of your way to follow me around the locker room? I wasn't bothering him. I wasn't talking to him at all. But, he just decided to follow me around the room, and it was very uncomfortable.
Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of what you did. For example, the LA Kings are playing Saturday night, and you're on the beat and you're covering the game, and you're going to write a post-game report. How does that happen? What do you do? What's your deadline? How quickly do you have to have your column written? And walk us through that.
Well, I have to say, speaking as an old person, business has changed an awful lot. Now at the LA Times, the deadlines starting next week are going to be 3:00 in the afternoon. So if the Kings play on a Saturday night, you're not going to see that in the paper until Monday. It'll be posted on the website. late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, but you won't see it in print until 2 days later. But how it used to be for many years was, let's say the Rangers were home or let's say the Kings were home. You'd go to the morning skate. You'd talk to players. You'd see what the lines were, the defense pairs. You'd see if anybody's missing. You kind of, talk to the coach, you talk to the players about maybe a previous game, or if you have an idea for a feature story that you're working on, you maybe grab a player or a couple of players and keep the quotes in your notebook or in your voice recorder. And then, you go to the game later, and sometimes you use the quotes from the morning skate as kind of a launching pad for the column that you write the next day. It varies. Sometimes you think you have this great material, and then something happens in the game and poof, it all blows up. So you all have to just kind of change tactics on the fly. But, there's a lot of adrenaline involved. You really need to be composed on deadline, and not everybody can do that. And there are times I kind of would look at my watch and go, wait a minute, I swear that 10 minutes have passed. I thought it was only 1 minute and 10 minutes have gone by. So, you're living your life on deadline. If you don't file on deadline, they'll find something else to fill that space, and you'll be out of a job pretty quick. So there's no excuses. You got to get that story filed.
Well, I used to see you a lot after games. And I always knew when you had some time to linger and talk and when you were on deadline, because when you were on deadline, you had a little bit of a crazed look in your eye, and you were is like, hi, how are you? I got to go. And you're hustling towards the dressing room to get in there and to get your quotes after the game. And of course, I always respected that you were working and didn't have time to chit chat, but whenever you did, of course, you stopped and we did catch up. But I could always tell when, she's working, working. Look at her go.
Yeah, we used to have several different editions so that you could get in the score. Say if they played on a Saturday night, if you filed by like 10 o'clock, you could get a story in, because the LA area is so big, we would have different editions because it takes so long just to put newspapers onto a truck and get them out to the stores where you buy them. So there would be like a 10 o'clock deadline and a 10:30, and then an absolute final of about pretty close to midnight. So for the first story, it would be kind of a play-by-play, maybe some observations if the coach changed the lines or mixed up the defense pairs, things like that. Maybe you use some of the quotes from the morning skate. Then, you add in game detail, and then you add in post-game quotes later. So you take out some of the stuff that you had earlier. So you're constantly revising, you're constantly analyzing, you're constantly just thinking ahead, and not only trying to analyze what went on, but, how am I going to follow this up? Like sometimes they don't play again for another couple days, and you kind of want to, especially now, I think too, is you want to look forward. You want to cast things forward, and just kind of give your readers a sense of what patterns are developing, what trends are you seeing, who's slumping, who's hot, what does that mean for, the fourth line, what does that mean if the top paired defenseman is hurt, you're just trying to wrestle a lot of moving parts at one time.
So let's talk a little bit about the 2005 call you got, letting you know that you were the recipient of the Elmer Ferguson Award for brilliance in sports writing, and immortalized in the Hockey Hall of Fame. What was it like when you got that call, and what was your feeling? What was your reaction?
Well, I don't know if you saw it, but on my Facebook page, I posted the LA Times let my husband write a column about that phone call and what that was like. And I remember it very well. I was sitting here, I was working on a couple of different things, and the phone rang, and it was Kevin Allan, who was president of the Hockey Writers Association, telling me I had won the Elmer Ferguson Award. And I said, thank you. Let me get back to whatever it was I was doing. And my husband's office was about 50 feet away, and you could call out to each other from where my desk is to where his was. And at some point, I don't remember when, I mean, after a few minutes, I said, oh, that phone call I just got, that was Kevin Allan. I won the Elmer Ferguson Award. And my husband started shrieking. I mean, just screaming. And I'm thinking, my God, our neighbors are going to think somebody's being murdered here. But he did just jumping up and down and yelling. And, I'm sitting there and I had a story to do. So that's what I'm trained to do. I was finishing up whatever I was working on. But that was a lovely moment. And on my Facebook page, I pasted a copy of the story he wrote, and he talked about that. And that was lovely. That was a very nice moment.
Yeah, I read Dennis's column, and it was beautiful and very heartfelt. And he's a brilliant writer in his own part for being able to capture the essence of you in that moment. Mm-hmm. Very special. Very special.
It was.
I was actually standing, and I'll never forget this. I was standing near you, and it was after it was publicly announced that you had won the Elmer Ferguson Award, and Wayne Gretzky came up to you and very quietly said to you, "Congratulations on the award." And it was after a game, and you were going to interview somebody or going into the visiting team locker room. But there was a moment shared between the two of you, and I happened to be standing right next to you when it happened, and I could tell that it was a special moment, but you were busy and you had to go.
Wayne, I mean, the ultimate class. That man was just so classy. Just to, change the topic a tiny bit here, but I remember I found out somehow that Wayne was helping financially support Bill Flett. And apparently Wayne helped out a lot of players who would follow.
One of the first guys with a full-on beard with the Flyers back in the early 70s.
Cowboy Bill Flett.
Cowboy Bill.
I believe they had played together in the WHA, and he had fallen on some hard times and had some medical issues. And Wayne very quietly was taking care of all this for him in terms of, finances, which must have been a terrible burden for him and his family, for Flett's family. And I found out about it, and I thought, wow, people should know about this. People should know what Wayne Gretzky is doing for this guy. And he just did not want me to write about it. He didn't think it was something that deserved attention. And apparently he was doing it for more than one person, Wayne was. He was helping out a lot of people. And I've always admired him for that. He doesn't need the spotlight. He doesn't need the headlines. He doesn't need people to know all these things that he was doing. He was doing it out of genuine respect and affection and friendship. And I've always admired and respected Wayne so much for that.
Well, you talk about Wayne, and you were here in LA before the Gretzky trade, and you were here. Oh, that's right. That's right. But let me ask you this: what do you credit to the rise of hockey in the Southwest and the creation of the Anaheim Ducks and San Jose Sharks? And all these American League teams, a whole American League division, and so many young players playing minor youth hockey in Southern California, and Southern California producing some great NHLers and future NHLers. What started all that?
Yeah, there would not be an NHL Sunbelt expansion without Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky, there would not be Anaheim Ducks without Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky gave hockey a human face, an appealing human face. I mean, you'd walk on the street and you would pass him and not know he's Wayne Gretzky, because people had this idea of he's such a great player. He must be like 7 feet tall and, have incredible muscles and everything, but he just looks like an average guy when you see him walking down the street. And here's this supposedly average looking guy doing these incredible things. And he knew he got it. He knew he was there not just to play, but to promote the game, to grow the game. Mm-hmm. And he did all kinds of appearances and promotional things. And he made sure the team went out and did promotional efforts all over the community. It would be too much to think that, okay, when Gretzky comes to LA, people start playing hockey. That takes a long time. It develops over a period of years. But do you think Trevor Moore of the Kings would have started playing hockey if Wayne Gretzky hadn't been here and his family hadn't liked hockey? I mean, you just see it now, the growth of not only in the NHL, but I mean, look at major colleges. There's so many kids from Southern California playing in major college programs and in the minor leagues. It's all because of Wayne Gretzky, because he put a human face on hockey for the NHL. He's the best thing that ever happened to the NHL. Truly is.
Yeah.
Helene, I got a question for you in terms of that era. And what year did you start with the LA Times?
1989.
1989. Okay. So this would have just, you would have seen some unbelievable characters walk through the Forum. Obviously, on the Lakers side, you got the Bus family, and obviously Wayne Gretzky, and so it's the end of the Magic Johnson era, beginning of the Wayne Gretzky era. But what I want to ask you about is the Forum itself, that building, because there's so many amazing stories. Obviously, the Showtime book and the Showtime series kind of illustrate how there was a nightclub and the way that Jack Kent Cooke ran it before the Bus family ran it. And in your experience, what made that building such a special place to play sports, basketball and hockey specifically?
Well, for so many years, it was just so glamorous. It was, it was new, and it's hard for people now to remember that, but it was new. It was glamorous. It was this incredible place that they built by themselves. It wasn't in downtown. It was in Inglewood. It was so distinctive. The shape of the building, the colors, everything was very distinctive about it. And I'll tell you a brief story about it. I was there for a hockey practice one day, and they had a very unusual, a concourse kind of level where you could stand and watch. And Jerry West came out of the Lakers office, and he saw me, and we just started chatting a little bit. And I believe it was the Penguins who were in town, and they were practicing. And he's watching them. And then after like 2 minutes, he goes, "That's Mario Lemieux, right?" Just immediately picked Lemieux out, which I always thought was just incredible. I just love that building. Although, you don't want to romanticize it too much, because the restroom situation was terrible in that building. There were always
Was it?
the restrooms there, and I think every building that's been built since then has gone out of their way to make sure there's enough restroom lines, because enough restrooms so there are no lines, because that also means that people aren't at concession lines if they're waiting to get into the restrooms.
Right. Right. It's funny because by the way, for anybody that's watching this, that's not a huge NBA fan, Jerry West, legendary basketball player in the 70s, won his one championship after how many years in the finals against the Boston Celtics. But what I love most, and he was also obviously the head coach and then the general manager of the Lakers. But what I love about Jerry West the most is he is the NBA logo. He's the guy who you see on the NBA like that. And he's also like, the way he was portrayed in the series, pretty intense man, prone to flying off the handle, and what a character that you got to stand there and talk to him. Like what kind of a presence was he to be up close and personal with him?
Well, it's funny too, because I remember calling him. He was getting some kind of award, and my editor said, "Why don't you call him and write a column about him getting this award?" So I call him, and he was like, "Oh, they're giving me an award? What are they doing? I don't deserve this award." And I don't want to talk about this. And they spent like half an hour talking about it. But he's really very humble, very intense. Yeah. He just had this eye for talent. There's been periodic movements over the years to change the NBA logo. I mean, there's been suggestions that maybe they should use an image of Kobe Bryant to update the NBA logo. But I love it. I love it that he's logo man. I think that's the ultimate tribute, and I wouldn't change that at all.
Now, Helene, you covered the 1980 U.S. Olympic team.
Mm-hmm.
in Lake Placid.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us about that experience?
I was working at Newsday then. It was the first Olympics I ever covered, and it just seemed strange to me that you could get in your station wagon and drive to the Olympics, which is what we did from Long Island. To me, the Olympics always seemed so exotic. You should get on a plane and it should be somewhere in some snowy village in Austria or something. And here we were driving up the Northway to Lake Placid. But it was a remarkable experience because, as you know, we all know now, I mean, the U.S. team had come to play the Russians at Madison Square Garden and had been absolutely wiped out, just totally obliterated. There are not very many expectations for the team. They had youth on their side, and we knew that Herb Brooks had driven them to be very well conditioned, use the legs. The legs feed the wolf was his saying, and that's absolutely so clever. It means everything if you think about it. But I remember my editor at Newsday telling me, you'll cover figure skating and you'll cover the hockey team. And, after they're eliminated, we'll find other things for you to do. Well, they weren't eliminated. And it just became so wonderful because, Herb cast himself as the bad cop. And Craig Patrick, who was the general manager of the team or, worked with Herb, Craig became the good cop. Herb would drive these players relentlessly during practices, and they would all go to complain to Craig Patrick and cry on Craig Patrick's shoulder. So he set up this dynamic that really worked. And also, it was mostly players from Massachusetts or Minnesota. And the kids from Massachusetts hated the Minnesota guys, and the Minnesota guys thought the Massachusetts guys were jerks. So to get them all, they were all united on one thing: hating Herb. but recognizing, but they knew what he was doing. That didn't mean they liked him. They recognized the necessity to be so in such good shape and to be in good condition. And obviously, their conditioning, their young legs, did a lot for them along the way. That enabled them to beat. You look at, I still have the rosters and game sheets and things. Some of those teams, the Czech team, the Russians, obviously, even the Finns, the Swedes too. A lot of those players went on to NHL careers. They beat some very, very good teams.
Right. People think that it was just one game and just beating the Russians and that was it. Beating the Russians, it was not the gold medal game. Right. It was they had to beat the Finns after beating the Russians to win gold. But you look at Team USA in the 1980 Olympics, and they went on a run where they beat a whole slew of great teams along the way to get there. It was not just a one-hit wonder, one game, and the movie Miracle, based on the USA gold medal team, very much was focused on the game against the Russians, and you would think that was the game when they won gold. Mm-hmm. But it actually, I remember the Olympics well that year, and who doesn't? It's remarkable to think that the games weren't even broadcast live on ABC.
Right.
People forget that.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. They weren't even broadcast live.
And the other thing is too is, Lake Placid is this little small village in the Adirondack Mountains, and back then there was no internet, there were no cell phones. I think CNN was on the air, but there was no 24-hour. There was no ESPN. There was no real strong connection to the world, and it was hard to know when you're in Lake Placid, isolated in this little village, what the rest of the world was thinking. And the only way you could know that the U.S. team was starting to get people's attention was people would send telegrams. And some official of Team USA would tape them up on the wall in the arena. So you'd see, Joe Blow from Minnetonka, Minnesota said, "Go Team USA." And, so-and-so from Milwaukee, Wisconsin sent in a telegram saying, "We love you guys." And the wall just gradually became covered with all these telegrams. And that was really the only way we knew that it was making an impression outside of Lake Placid. We had no way of knowing that.
Wow. I want to ask you, because that when you talk to certain sports writers, sports commentators, even people that call games, they do so many of them that sometimes it just kind of blurs together and they don't remember the moment and the feeling. But I think when you talk to journalists like yourself, your job is to capture that moment and relay it via written word to the rest of us. What was it like when they won that game? Can you remember the feeling in that arena? You remember how you felt?
Yeah. It was this incredible sense of disbelief, of joy, you have to remember too, the context of the political atmosphere of the time was very, very tense.
Cold War, Afghanistan invasion.
Exactly. So this wasn't just a game. It became this kind of thing of political system versus political system, which it wasn't. But, that's how people saw it. And that's what people brought to it. I remember going outside afterward and the streets were full. People were just dancing and singing and jumping up and down. And I somehow ended up standing next to a Russian. I don't know if he was an official or a fan or whatever, but he was wearing, the big poof, bushy hat, and the furry hat, excuse me.
Cossack hat?
Yeah. And a big coat and everything. And I was just kind of watching, and I glanced over at him, and he saw me look at him, and he held up his index finger, and he goes, "1, you are number 1." And I thought that was so cool. That was just so
That
cool.
is cool.
Yeah. And it just that people were just dancing in the streets. It was just an incredible feeling. And Main Street in Lake Placid isn't very big, but I remember going outside the side door to the arena right next to the high school, and it was just jammed full of people. It was incredible.
What was it like for you interviewing the players, if you had a chance to do that after the gold medal game?
I remember they brought him to the high school, which was right next door, the auditorium in the high school. And, Herb had not spoken very much during the tournament, and he sometimes didn't want players to speak too, but obviously you just, you can't prevent them from speaking after a game like that. I remember guys sprawled out on the stage and just kind of, just so happy. They were out of their minds, basically. They were just, they were just so happy about the whole thing and just so almost in disbelief because, 99 times out of 100, Russia's going to beat them. That was the 1 in the 100. And I think they realized it too. I mean, obviously they earned it. They deserved that win. But so many things had to come together so perfectly for that to happen. The Russians to pull the goalie after 2 periods, the U.S. to have all those horrible drills. They called them Herbies that were designed to build up players' strength and stamina in their legs. The U.S. was the fresher team later in the games because of all those drills that they hated that Herb put them through, but they all paid off.
Right. So, looking back on your career as one is opt to do at this time, what are some of your greatest memories? Things that have stood out to you that you recall that maybe no one else has ever heard about before or you've never shared?
Oh, wow. Maybe I ought to save that for a book. I don't know.
Well, that's my next question. I
was going to ask that too.
Have you thought about writing a book about your illustrious career?
I really haven't, only because, other female sports writers before me have done the Women in the Locker Room book, and I don't know how much I could have to add to that. But, for me, it's mostly about just making connections and big moments. At Newsday during the Islanders 4 straight cups, I don't think we appreciated what went into that and how difficult, how incredibly difficult that was. And here we are 40 plus years later, nobody's won 3 in a row, let alone 4. And I don't think anybody ever will. And if I recall correctly, the 1980 Islanders, their first cup, that was the first year you had to play 4 rounds.
Yes.
Yep. And Kenny Morrow, who won the U.S. Olympic gold medal in February, right after the Olympics, joined the Islanders and won the cup.
Yep.
So he won an Olympic gold medal and a Stanley Cup within 4 months of each other.
Right. The man had good timing there. Yeah. Watching guys like Mike Bossy, who I think is still the best pure goal scorer I've ever seen. That Islander team, they weren't playing in New York City. They didn't get the publicity that the Rangers did, they didn't go to nightclubs. They weren't, making page 6 of the New York Post. They weren't doing those kind of things.
They weren't dating supermodels.
They were not dating supermodels. No. But, just the incredible character on that team, Trottier, Gillies, Bossy. I always like Dave Langevin, Stefan Persson, just incredible.
Billy Smith,
people with
Billy Smith.
Goofy, character, and just think about what it takes to win all those, 4, 16, so 19 playoff series in a row? Yeah. They made it to the finals in the 5th year. I don't think anybody will ever do that again. It's just so hard now because of Allan's favorite salary cap. I don't want to.
Oh, you've heard, have you?
Here, but, but I don't think it'll happen again. It's just too difficult now.
I love that story of, Wayne Gretzky walking by, and I don't know if it's apocryphal or not. But there's that story of in 1983, Wayne Gretzky walking by the Islanders dressing room after losing his first finals to the Islanders, and I think that was 6 or 7 games. And instead of celebrations in the dressing room, the guys were sitting around, basically patching themselves back together because they had won the cup, but they had really given everything to do it. And he said that gave him the motivation. I'm not sure. I want to ask you: is that story true? By the way.
See, I'm not sure about that, but I do remember, because I remember standing backstage, and it was the year Billy Smith won the Conn Smythe. And, he had been just so critical of Gretzky. He would say, you got to take him by his hand and introduce him to his own goaltender, because, he would say Gretz doesn't play defense. And, he called him Wine Gretzky and things like that. So here is Billy Smith winning the Conn Smythe. And Gretzky is standing there waiting to go on stage to talk. And Billy Smith, comes out. He's still wearing his goalie pads and everything. And he, trudges off the stage. Gretzky sticks out his hand to shake his hand. And again, remember the name calling back and forth and how Smith just mercilessly mocked him. And Smith almost walked by, but then he just very quickly tapped his hand and kept walking by. But I thought that was a behind the scenes moment that I thought was really cool.
That's a good
I think
one.
The Islanders were just an unusual group. And again, I don't think anybody's going to win 4 cups in a row again. It's just not engineered to happen.
Bossy wasn't a Gretzky fan either, right? There was some tension there. Is that true?
I don't know. I don't know that to be true, to be honest with you.
I just know that Mike Bossy was extraordinarily competitive. I know that.
Yes, he was.
Let's go ahead, Allan. Sorry.
So, Helene, you talked about lockouts, and we always had a lot of communication going back and forth during the 04-05 lockout, and you wrote a beautiful column when it was over, and I think I gave you a quote for that column and the 12-13 lockout. What was your overall sense during these lockouts of what was going on in the game and the impact those lockouts have had on the game and the NHL salary cap? And you know me long enough to know that whatever your opinions are, you're not going to offend me at all in any way. So what do you think?
Well, I think first of all, it's sad in a way that we have to specify which lockout we're talking about because there've been so many, and that's not like any other sport. You have to specify. No, the 94-95 lockout. No, the 04-05. No, the 12-13. You know, and it's true. I mean, what other sport has done that? So I know that you're a big voice against the salary cap. I'm not sure that taking that away would continue to allow for competition. I know that you're a big guy saying that the game should be promoted more, and I agree. I'm just wondering where the next revenue sources are going to come from, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, we're seeing a revolution now in media rights, streaming, as opposed, moving away from cable and conventional, traditional TV towards streaming. You look
Cutting the cords.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You look at the media rights fees that other leagues are getting, and you have to, for the NHL has a deal that's good for the NHL. But how do you grow the audience? I'm not sure that they know how to do that. How do you grow the audience so that there is a greater demand so that you can get the bigger media rights fees? That's where the money is. And, they talk about expansion and, there's already so many teams. I don't know that you can support 34 teams if you can't support a team in Phoenix. You can't get that team in Arizona some stability. And I've been reading lately about the attendance problems in Winnipeg. And I feel sorry for the situation there. I mean, when it comes to making a decision between paying your rent and buying a hockey ticket, there's something wrong. And the NHL remains the most gate dependent of all the leagues because it doesn't get the media rights fees and the sponsorship fees and that kind of revenue that the other leagues get. I think the NHL needs to really examine the way it can and should grow. I think we need to see some new ideas. I mean, I love the outdoor games, but those have limited appeal, I think. You build up to it on the day. Okay, great. It's a lovely spectacle, but then it's gone. What legacy does that leave? How does that grow the game? I'm not sure it does. And I don't have the answers, but I'd like to see some people try some unconventional things. I'd like to see some people recognize that you need to help kids afford to be able to play hockey in a lot of places.
I think that there's been a tremendous lost opportunity on the international side. Not having a World Cup since World Cup of Hockey since 2016, and not having regular best on best tournaments. You see the NBA, they get the players and the league and people together and the stakeholders in the game, and they come up with an in-season tournament. And boom, they execute it. And then they learn from it. This is what worked well. This is what maybe didn't work well. And we're going to tweak it for next time. And they sold the in-season tournament with additional media rights fees and brought, a new, exciting level of interest into the game from people who may not have been casual fans. And to have, to this day, Connor McDavid not wearing the Canadian jersey as a professional is just an incredible lost opportunity. And why, you put people in the room, and why not do, a Ryder's Cup kind of North America against the world tournament? What about a 3-on-3 tournament? 3-on-3 hockey, overtime hockey for 5 minutes is some of the most incredible, exciting hockey. Why not get these people together and throw all this against the wall and see what sticks and have energy and creativity and excitement around growing the game? And instead, it's just dormant. There is no critical thinking. There's no creative thinking. Try something, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But for the love of God, try it. And people look at the NHL now, and they're like, "Whoa, it's a $6 billion industry. Gary has done a great job in growing the game." Do you know where it should be right now? It should be over 10 billion. It should be 12 billion. Why are you happy with where it is today?
Well, 2 points. First, to go back to the NBA and the in-season tournament, they held their finals in a city that doesn't even have an NBA franchise. Their final was in Vegas. Yep. So, you talk about growth opportunities, and you know very well that there's going to be an NBA team in Vegas within the next couple of years, and that's just going to be staggering. And the Golden Knights deserve an enormous amount of credit for paving the way for that. Everything that they've done has been so spot on in terms of, just from starting. They would not sell blocks of season tickets to casinos. They wanted to make sure they were selling to individual season ticket holders. They could have, I'm sure, sold out the place just to casinos and have the casinos give tickets away to high rollers or whatever. But they wanted to build a base, a stable, sustainable base. And they did it brilliantly. Everything they've done has been brilliant. I think the other thing too, though, and you talk about international growth for the NHL, and obviously that's a big thing. For them to go back to the Olympics is essential. I honestly think you still need domestic growth in the NHL. Mm-hmm. In American cities, you need more kids to start playing hockey. And eventually these kids will become ticket buyers. They'll become corporate vice presidents who say, "Hey, I want my company to associate with the NHL." You need to get beyond the very fanatic but limited base that hockey has now.
Yes.
I want to throw something out there too, guys. What I've always been surprised about with the NHL is why they've never driven an initiative for a value brand of hockey equipment. And what I mean by that is, you've got Toyota and you've got Acura. You've got Honda. Sorry, it's Honda and Acura. You got Toyota, you got Lexus. You've got Volkswagen, you have Audi. All of the brands that sell hockey equipment, the things that make hockey in youth sports unaffordable, are going for the premium buy. I have an enormous head, like a physically big head. And so for me to get a hockey helmet, I've got to go to a specialized and try to find, and I got to stretch them out or whatever. I've been wearing the same Nike helmet for 20 years because I still can't find one. Tried to replace it a couple of years ago. It was $300 for a helmet for men's league. Why is it like, you got CCM, you got Bauer, you got whoever else is making hockey equipment. They all seem to be going for the premium buy. I'm really surprised that the NHL's never spearheaded some sort of scalable, low cost, here's your entry level equipment for house league players to just give it a try. And why doesn't the NHL have community rinks and community leagues and things like that it supports to help grow this game? Because as we've seen in the experiments in Florida and in Southern California, in Tennessee, it's working. It could just be working a lot faster if they juiced it a little.
I agree. And I think that, some teams do have initiatives. The Flyers for many years have been active in the community. The Kings and the Ducks have both made concerted efforts here in Southern California. But as much as they can subsidize it, it's still a very expensive sport. You want to go play basketball at lunchtime. All you have to do is get a pair of sneakers, change into a t-shirt and shorts. Okay. You want to go play hockey at lunchtime? That's a much bigger endeavor. You've got to rent ice time. You got to have the equipment. You have to have enough players. I mean, it's just basketball. You can play with two people. You can't play hockey with two people. It's not the same. And it's not the same mindset. Whereas, in the US, guys might get to the people who work together might get together to play basketball after work, or they don't do that for hockey, or very rarely. Again, because of the inconvenience, because of the elaborate preparations you have to make to play hockey. I'm not sure that's curable, to be honest. I mean, just the nature of hockey, you need to play on a rink. That's going to be expensive. Renting ice time. When the Kings and the Ducks went through 10 or 12 years where they were both so good and winning the cup and making it to the finals and all, that set off a boom of rink building here in Southern California, or renovating older existing rinks. And I mean, Allan, your kids were playing, and you would schlep them to, Paramount and Pasadena and Lakewood and, all over creation and
Panorama City and Valencia.
Absolutely. And, the Ducks opened an incredible facility in Irvine, with, is it 5 sheets of ice there? Figures, that's become a huge figure skating haven. Some, world-class figure skating, pair figure skaters train there. There's, the ice time is just so expensive. The equipment is just so expensive. I mean, you can go to elementary schools and give kids, plastic sticks and rubber balls, and they can run around in sneakers and, play ball hockey in a schoolyard. I'm not sure that sticks. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that creates a lifelong love of the game. Maybe it does. I would hope it does. But there are some problems inherent in this sport. It's a wonderful sport. We all love it. We love the people who play it. I mean, I still think hockey players are the most down to earth and approachable and decent, hardworking, team oriented guys of all the sports I've covered. But there are just some conditions in the sport that are really difficult to overcome.
Yeah, in the NHL CBA, there is something called the Industry Growth Fund, which is basically Gary's slush fund that he can use to dedicate to various communities for initiatives to grow the game. That's the purpose of that fund, and it's never been, in my humble opinion, used in the right way to do all the things, Helene, that you just talked about, to make that investment in growing hockey at the grassroots level. There's so much talk about it, and there's a lot of PR around various initiatives around the U.S., but it's like, okay, somebody is doing something. Let's promote the hell out of it to show everybody what we're doing. But it's not a sustained, well thought out program to really make an impact now and down the road. And the money dedicated to these initiatives, it's just, we're going to throw a little bit of money here. Let's do something. Let's get some media around it. And there, we've checked off that item, and see, we are doing something. Nobody's going to say we're not doing something, but it's had a very minimal impact on actually growing the game and doing all the things that Elaine just talked about that needs to be done to really take hockey to the next level in the United States.
Yeah, and another thing too is, you look at TV presentation. And, the NHL is back on ESPN, which is obviously something that Gary Bettman wanted. They considered it prestigious. But, I've written a lot of basketball columns, too. I've done, Lakers and Clippers stuff. I will tune into TNT's NBA telecasts, even if the game is not one that I particularly want to watch, because I love watching Charles Barkley. I just think that studio crew that they have is just magical. They make their fun. They're not forcing it. It's natural. I mean, I watch some of the NHL telecasts, and it's just, I just cringe sometimes, to be honest with you. It's so forced.
And in fact, if you look at the TNT desk and what they have done with Biz and Gretzky, and when, Rick Tocchet was on, I mean, they were able to create a tiny little bit of magic and personality and interest. I mean, I looked forward to when games last year and this year are on TNT, because you get that added the stuff they bring away from just watching the game. And I know that people that I talk to love, a character and personality like Biz. He's the Charles Barkley of NHL analysts right now, whether you like it or not. And that's great for the game. and he's outspoken and he's opinionated, and all of that is just wonderful to see.
But I'd like to see the NHL be a little bit more forward on that too, a little bit more progressive on that too. And, not necessarily, we don't have to go back to glow pucks, the Fox glow puck. Or, although I wouldn't mind having Peter Puck back. I always like Peter Puck. But, what can you do? I would like to see them be more experimental. Like to see them, and that isn't just putting microphones on players. And I don't know what there is to do. And if I had great ideas, somebody would pay me for them, and I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But you're in a situation where you need to be noticed. You want a bigger audience. Do something different. Be distinctive. Get out there.
Well, I know somebody with. I've never met them in person, but with 25, 30, 40 years of experience around the game who might, now might have time to write a book about it. Just a thought. Maybe, Helene, maybe that's your book. Maybe it's what the NHL can do to grow the game. I mean, seriously, there'd be few people who have seen it, and I'm not blowing smoke here. There's been few people that have seen it grow the way that it has for as many years as you have, being around as many stars as you have. Could that be something that you would even consider coming back and even writing guest columns about?
I hadn't thought about that. That's, I guess you're now my co-author, or I owe you a slice if I ever do it.
No. That's all yours.
Get part of the paycheck. But, and again, this is a sport we love. These are players we love. And sometimes it's just infuriating to see that they don't capitalize on their best asset, which is their players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, Helene, you wrote in your column yesterday, the right moment, it's the right moment to jump off the cliff and hope to land on a pile of soft foam blocks instead of a row of jagged rocks. What do you mean by that?
I don't know what's next. I don't have anything lined up. I mean, people have said, "Oh, so you're going to go to this place or that place?" I'm going, no, I have nothing set up. I have nothing planned at all. I did this for a long time, and the stresses of the business has changed. The set post game situations have changed. The deadlines have changed. The editors. I mean, we used to have a sports editor at the LA Times. His name was Bill Dwyer, and I used to joke with him about how he hated hockey. And he would always tell me he won a writing prize when he worked for the paper in Milwaukee for a piece he did on Bobby Hull. Now, he wasn't a huge hockey fan, but he recognized that there was an audience, and he made sure we covered hockey. I'd go to the Stanley Cup Finals. If I had an idea to do something on Mario Lemieux, he'd let me go to Pittsburgh. If I had an idea to do something on a Ranger or Buffalo Sabre or whatever, he would send me to those places. He would, when Lisa Dillman was covering the Kings, she was on the road all the time. He recognized there was a need to cover hockey. Now we don't have that anymore. Everything is dictated by the number of clicks on our website, and they'll determine future coverage based on, and I understand the idea is to give people what they want to read. And if people have demonstrated that they most often want to read the Dodgers, they most want to read about the Lakers, they want to read about USC football, UCLA basketball, I understand that. Let's give that to them. But there was always just a nobility to it that I liked, that, you may not know you want to read about water polo, but when I present this column about this young woman, the U.S. national water polo team, the goalkeeper is a young Black woman, and she has had an incredible story about learning how to swim and learning how to play water polo and the obstacles she's faced. Well, I think people deserve to read about her. Maybe she won't get as many web hits as a Lakers column would, but you may learn something from reading about this young woman, or reading about a figure skater, reading about a young tennis player. I mean, there's so many wonderful stories out there to be told, and it seems to me we're narrowing our focus when we should be making it broader. And so that's been a source of frustration for me. And, none of us is getting younger. It's a little more difficult, coming home from games at 1:00 in the morning on the 405 freeway or the 110 freeway. Isn't very glamorous and isn't very much fun anymore. So, things have changed. I felt it was time I could have just trudged along. I could have kept going, but I just felt it was time to just make a change.
And do you have any plans for the next couple of months? Do you have any idea of what you're going to do when you are officially no longer with the Times anymore?
I'm officially, as of today, no longer with the Times. So,
wow.
But
I guess today would be the first day.
Today's the first day of the rest of my life. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And it's odd. I mean, of my entire adult life, I've had a job. I work for a daily newspaper, and I don't anymore, which is kind of a strange feeling. But I'd like to do some freelance writing at some point. Right now, I just need time to get my life together and just kind of figure out what's next. Not have to go drive on the 110 at 1 a.m, not have to listen to an athlete tell me, well, it is what it is. No, it isn't. Stop saying that.
Allan hates that, by the way.
That's another thing, too, and it goes back to what I was saying about, the NHL not capitalizing on the players and their unique stories and everything. There's just so much control. The teams want to control the messages now. And I get it. There aren't as many daily newspapers or magazines traveling to cover teams anymore. Toronto would come in, there used to be 5 writers. Now there's maybe 1. Edmonton came to the LA last week and there was 1 writer who didn't work for the team. So teams have their website people and writers and videos, and they're trying to get out their message that way. But they restrict access to players now so badly that you don't feel like you get to know these guys anymore. And that's really a shame. I mean, you used to be able to go into the locker room after practice and just sit there and, somebody's sitting there, you strike up a conversation. Maybe at least you're writing about something. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just, you strike up a friendship. You just learn a little bit about a guy and what makes him tick. You can't do that anymore. You go in the room now after practice and you have to have requested players. And there's usually 2 players, maybe 3. Mm-hmm. And that hurts your ability to cover the team on a regular basis if you don't know these guys as well. And I think it hurts hockey too. And that, you're not getting these stories out there. You're not giving us access to these guys who have some really interesting stories to tell. And we can't tell them if they're not being made available.
How insane is that? I mean, I have seen from my vantage point, a lot of writers being squeezed out with their newspapers, going to work for the league, and God bless them. They're doing a great job. They're doing everything they can, and in many situations, this is a profession. You need a job. You need to get paid, and we all understand and recognize that. But how free are they when they're working for the league and writing, for example, NHL.com, or working for a club and having get paid by the club? How free are they to criticize the league?
The answer to
How
that.
free are they? Oh, yeah. Well, we know the answer. And a lot of that is almost, I had the feeling when that trend started that the league was rubbing their hands together saying, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, we're now going to have our own army of writers working for us, paid by us, who will no longer be out there. And those are the people that are going to get the limited access we're willing to grant.
Exactly.
And the writers will be telling the stories we want told.
Exactly.
And I just think that is so bad for the game and really bad for journalism. And I've said this, and I've said this to many people. We know how it works. We know the way the game works behind the scenes. and I just think it is very, very short-sighted. Why is there such an obsessiveness of maintaining control? It's not a bad thing to have a diversity of opinion, and it's not a bad thing to be criticized. Are you so insecure that a writer will write something critical that in the old days would maybe spark change? And have people consider another way of looking at a situation? And are they so insecure that no, we're going to stamp out any criticism? And really, it has done the game a great disservice.
Absolutely agree. And again, I understand why teams have their website writers. And, again, there's so much change in the media business. There would be 3 or 4 or 5 local papers or, would cover the Kings, for example, and the last couple of years, the LA Times wasn't covering Kings home games, which is, to my mind, I just hated that. But those decisions were made above me. And, visiting teams come in and you don't see the number of people that you used to see. You would see the team's website people. And I get it. The teams want coverage. So they hired these writers to tell the stories of their players with a slant, of course. They're going to emphasize all the good stuff. They're going to dig really, really hard sometimes to find positives when there really aren't positives to be found. I don't know what the answer is, but again, it's just that's one of the frustrations that I found in this business this last few years. And, I wanted you'd had to specifically request a player. And if other writers didn't want to talk to the player you requested, maybe you didn't get that player at all. It just became so frustrating when there are stories to be told and you're not given the access to tell the stories. The business has changed, life has changed, and I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, even though I am. Old man yelling at the sky, at the cloud, but there are some things that used to be better that have vanished. And among those things was the ability to I remember when I was covering the Rangers and they were practicing at Rye Playland. You'd just walk into the room and guys would be sitting there. You talk to somebody, you walk in the door, somebody says hello. Maybe you stop and talk to them, or you go walk over to talk to somebody else, or you just can observe the banter between players, players joking with each other, players talking to each other, players, maybe somebody has some kind of, photo of his kid in his locker and you ask about that and then it ends up being a really good story. You don't see that. You don't get to experience that anymore. And you lose so much because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, Helene, you've been incredibly generous with your time. And I don't want to keep you any longer than we already have. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for honoring us with your presence. There is nobody that I respect more than you in the game. You're an incredible journalist and an even better person. And I wish you all the happiness and joy that life can bring from this point forward. I know in my heart that our paths will cross again.
Hope so.
I just don't know.
Absolutely,
don't know when and where, but they will. And thank you so much for bringing so much to so many people, including me. I learned from you. I admired you. I enjoyed every column you ever wrote, and seeing you at the rinks was always a great joy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.